All right, we're going to call the meeting to order. Thank you everyone for attending today. Good afternoon and welcome to the September 25th, 2025 Audit and Finance Committee meeting. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of Treaty 4 territory, a treaty signed with 35 First Nations across Saskatchewan and parts of Alberta and Manitoba, and the original lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nations. The City of Regina owns its strength and vibrancy to these lands and the diverse Indigenous people whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory, as well as settlers from around the world who continue to be welcomed here and call Regina home. Some members of the committee and city administration may be attending the meeting today through video conferencing. I'd like to remind those who are attending of the following. Please ensure that your video camera and microphone are turned off. If a member of the committee wishes to speak, raise your hand. Use the function will be placed in the speaking queue. When speaking, remember to unmute your microphone and enable your video camera. All votes will be conducted with a recorded vote. Deadline to register as a delegation for reports recommended for consideration by City Council at this meeting is scheduled for October 8th, is at 12 p.m. Monday, October 6th. Can I have someone move a motion to approve the agenda at the call of the chair? Mr. Willen? Can I call the question? Any opposed? All right, carried. Adoption of the minutes. Can I have someone move a motion to adopt the minutes of the public meeting held August 28th, 2025? Councillor Teclise? Any errors and omissions? No. I'll call the question. Any opposed? Carried. Administration. We will now consider AFC 25-20, Delegation of Authority Registry. Can I ask the CFO and Deputy City Manager, Mr. Darren Anderson, to please introduce the report?
Thank you, and through the chair. This report shares the City of Regina's Consolidated Delegation of Authority, or DOA. At the March 20th, 2024 City Council meeting, administration was instructed to bring back the consolidated DOA. The DOA is a requirement as part of Section 12D of the Regina Administration Bylaw 2003-69. This living document will be internally published, and new versions will be published quarterly as required. The DOA will allow for a centralized and structured matrix that will align with the city's strategic priority of operational excellence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I have someone move this report to be received and filed? Councillor Teclise? Any questions on the report? Okay. If there are no questions, I will sorry. Any question on the report? Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. We will now consider item AFC 25-21 Cyber Security Audit. Can I ask the Internal Auditor, Danikar, to please introduce the report?
Good evening, members of the committee. This report provides the Audit and Finance Committee with the results of the cybersecurity audit. The objective of this audit was to assess the effectiveness of the city's process and procedures related to cybersecurity. Cybersecurity audits assist the city in identifying prioritized industry accepted practices and security controls that address the areas of greatest risk to the organization and strengthen its security posture. The cybersecurity audit was outsourced to the consultants Mayors Norris Penny M&P Digital. Outsourcing is opted when the audit project requires specialized skill or knowledge, such as information technology audits. MNP performed a cybersecurity assessment against the National Institute of Standards and Technology Cybersecurity Framework 2.0, as well as penetration testing. The objective of the assessments focused on identifying key security exposures and vulnerabilities that present a risk to the city and allow an attacker disrupt systems, gain unauthorized access, or perform unauthorized changes to applications and data. MNP has recommended a phased approach that focuses on immediate actions to close high priority gaps and continue with longer term improvements to strengthen overall cybersecurity governance. Administration has already begun implementing controls that address many of the audit recommendations. Some corrective actions were already planned. These efforts will significantly assist the city in its ability to safeguard its operations and information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I have someone move this report to be received and filed? Mr. William? Any questions from the member? Any other questions? Okay. I'd like to ask the mover, you'd like to close the debate. Okay, perfect. I'll call the question. Any opposed? No. All right, carried. I will now consider item AFC 25-20 or -22, 2025 reserve review. Can I ask the CFO and Deputy City Manager, Mr. Darren Anderson, to please introduce the report?
Thank you, and through the chair. This report is required by the Regina Administration Bylaw and combines 3 reports into one: the 2024 Annual Reserve Report, the 2025 Second Quarter Report, and the 2025 Reserve Review. Reserves contain funds authorized by City Council to be set aside for future capital and operating needs. Reserves continue to provide a mechanism to support operations, the maintenance of assets, new infrastructure, and sustainability of City of Regina's services, and are considered best practice for municipal financial controls. At December 31st, 2024, the city's reserves totaled $196.6 million. This total represents a $3.9 million or a 2% increase from the total at December 31st, 2023. Compared to 2023, the total operating reserves decreased $8 million, capital reserves decreased $7.7, and self-sustaining reserves increased $19.5 million. At the end of 2024, 16 of the city's 24 reserves were within range, 4 were below the minimum limit, and 4 were above the maximum limit. The reserve balances over the last 5 years have remained relatively stable. However, total reserves are projected to decrease from current levels of 196 in 2024 to 141 million by the end of 2025 and to 63 million by the end of 2029. As a result, this report contains recommendations for administration to consider funding options in the 2026 budget for 6 reserves that are either expected to be negative or below minimum limits in the next 5 years. The report also has several recommendations to update the Regina Administration Bylaw for minimum and maximum limits, new reserves, and new reporting requirements. Of the 4 new reserves being recommended, only 1 requires a new funding source. In addition to my finance staff, we have owners of the reserves in attendance or online to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, and I submit the report for your review.
Thank you very much. Can I have someone move the report? Councillor Teclise, do you wish to speak on the report? Any questions from the member of the report on the report? Ms. Aurora?
Sure. A number of questions just regarding the total nature of the reserves and how they're shrinking over time, and some specific questions on some of the reserves as to how the position that they've gotten themselves in. So just, I guess, your general sense of you know, the reserves are falling to, you know, almost 100 million or more over time and are forecast to be drawn down. Kind of leaves you in a precarious situation for all those different areas. And just your thoughts or your plans to replenish those funds, such as the general revenue fund and other funds that are not only below the minimum, but not even, like, I think the minimum is sort of the lowest possible balance you could be at. In order to be at a sufficient level, you need to fund them probably at average or midpoint, I don't know. But any plans to sort of bring those reserves back up to where they need to be so that you have the funds going forward in the future? And then I have some follow-up questions from that.
Yeah. Thank you, and through the chair. So definitely we're concerned, especially where we're below the minimums. To say we shouldn't go below the minimums or should never go below the minimums is probably not true. Your reserves are there for a reason. You know, if we have some sort of major event happen, that's why they're there, right? And so you could go down and then you have to have a plan, to your point, to get back up. In terms of the general fund reserve specifically, and it being under, I can look back and say, you know what, record levels of inflation and trying to keep up with that inflation has caused us to run some deficits, which has brought that reserve below the minimum. I would say now that inflation is stabilized, we need to develop a plan with administration and with the approval of council on how we're going to get that fund specifically up above. All of the other funds will have ebbs and flows to them, but the same premise holds, to your point. If you dip below the minimum, you have to understand why, and then develop a plan to get back above. So that's what we need to do on an individual basis. And that's why part of the recommendation of this report is for you guys to recommend council, to recommend administration, to develop plans that would get put onto the supplemental list at budget time on how we can start to build these reserves back up.
Yeah, it would be useful if there was, you know, a target for, you know, the reserves of the fund to be, like you say, they do fluctuate. You could be below minimum at times. What happens in something in the case of, like, well, the cemetery reserve is a little concerning, and some of the other ones that have fallen into negative territory. So you're putting costs against those funds, but then don't have revenue, so that money must come from your general cash, or how do you get a negative fund?
So through the chair, great question. So when we have a negative balance in a reserve, we're essentially borrowing against our other reserves.
Okay, yeah.
Right? So if you think of it on a cash basis, we're down, but we still have, we're still in a good cash and strong investment position, but we're borrowing against ourselves. Cemeteries is actually a good example to explain this. So there was a specific project, I believe in 2023, 2024, around cemeteries that we and council decided to invest in. We knew, though, we could borrow against our other reserves, let the reserve go into negative, and we have a plan to get back to positive in that reserve. So,
Okay.
Right, not too concerned actually with the cemeteries one, because we do have a plan that brings it back up into the positive. But in general, we can borrow from one reserve to pay for another in a short term. So my personal opinion is that we wouldn't want to do that long term, because how do you ever get out of it, right? And you don't want to go too far, right? We've only got so many reserves to borrow against. You don't want to have a situation where if you go too negative, you start having a liquidity event.
So for a fund like the winter maintenance fund, you know, on average, it's going to be about $13 million worth of spending on winter road clearing or winter maintenance. You're down to, I think you're down to zero right now. Is your plan then to, you know, you should be putting 13 million a year into that fund, the average. And some years you'll be more, some years you'll be less, but then you'll have a balance in that fund so that when it is more, you're not drawing from general revenues. And if it's less, well, good, you can hopefully bank on that for another year. But you should be putting in the range of 13 million a year into that fund. I just throwing that out there for your thoughts or comments. And do other funds have an average expense that you would sort of be targeting as an investment in that fund so that they would operate the same way?
Through the chair, yes, great question. So that's fund specifically identified and talked with our staff, because I don't know why it hasn't gone into the negative. So to your point, we've been budgeting around $11 million for snow removal and spending 13. Now, what we've did in this case is, for some reason, instead of taking the fund into the negative, we were actually putting it to the GFR, right? And so running it through a deficit. But now we've lost sight of, to your point, if the cost of snow removal has been going up for 4 years, and we obviously haven't had a year where we spent less than budget to replenish the reserve, we want to know how far we get down. As part of our recommendations here, we're actually recommending that the minimum for snow removal become a negative number. Because over time, I can cycle and have a couple bad years in a row, and I can borrow against myself, so I'm not going back to the taxpayer inadvertently, and then build it back up. But once you get close to that minimum, you have to have a plan, to your point, to increase the budget, because it's not just a cyclical thing anymore. You now have a permanent increase in the cost of snow removal. And so you need to now adjust. By keeping this just at zero and moving it all into deficit, we lost the sort of the functionality of that reserve. So we're going to bring that in as part of the recommendations here.
So aside from increasing the limits, like the ranges that the fund could be in, any plans or thoughts to like make it a requirement to fund these things at the average? Like you're funding them at about 11 mils, you're short already. Is it part of your plan to put this into fund policy, that you fund the average expense and recalculate that as part of your budget process, but that you're required to fund that average expense so that your funds are all stable over time?
So through the chair, yes, another great question. And so the technical answer right now is no. What we've started to discuss is, where I went, is instead of having a hard, you should be here and let's, always automatically correct, that can make it hard on a taxpayer, right? The whole purpose of reserves is to try and not overreact to a bad year, especially in operating reserves. What we've discussed is starting to think of a plan, and I have to discuss this with all of the people in this room, so we're all in the room together, I guess, is adding to the bylaw to say, once you reach the minimum, there needs to be a plan in place to replenish the reserve within 2 to 3 years, right? But what I need to do more work on is to sort of feel like, where is a good balance there? Because 1 year I don't, what you're talking about is basically, if you get here, you better get back up.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that to taxpayers. So I want to get a feel for, is 2 to 3 years a typical time frame, and go, what's our plan to actually get back up? Then do we want to add the teeth into the bylaw that says you have to then put that in the budget? Because then I'm taking away the power of council from deciding whether or not to replenish that reserve or not. So that would be a conversation, the next level, with council. So you're hitting all the hot spots here, Ted.
Well, good.
So I appreciate it.
It's council has got a lot on their plate, so good. Throw another one. I think that's prudent. I mean, if you know you're spending this money, by allowing yourself through funds, deficits in funds, to defer or to ignore that expense, you're not doing yourself a favor. You're kind of lying to yourself to skate over the day. So, but I also understand your need to give some discretion. You can't be too rigid, or else it won't work. Okay, I'm gonna stop at that. That was sort of my main points, and just let folks go from there. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. Thank you for the detailed account, detailed report. Really helpful. Ted already asked my question about the negative balance, so that's great. Just when you were talking about that, kind of the idea or concept of staging over a few years and that for replenishment, would it be safe to say that that would help us maybe tackle some of the ebbs and flows and some of the peaks that we've seen in mill rate due to inflation and that? Would it help to potentially level set that a little bit, be more predictable year after year? Like, what's your kind of feel on that if we were to go down that path?
Through the chair, yes, great question, Mayor. I would say, the overall large inflation we just went through after COVID impacted everything. What this would do is allow for peaks and valleys within one of these reserves to smooth it out. So, right, you borrow against the other ones. Where I'm concerned right now is just the overall level is down, right? So I'm okay if some are down and some are up, right? We're in good financial health. But we need to, at this point, I think we need to come up with a plan to get all the reserves back up to a more comfortable level because of that downward pressure, that high level inflation. You know, if, for instance, snow removal is just the best example. I could have a couple years in a row of high snow, but you can borrow against other reserves where things, you know, not as many potholes or water main breaks, etc. Inflation is really hard to insulate against if it's not in the target range because it impacts everything.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Councillor DeCleese?
Have we ever had in the past, again, asking the new guy asking the new guy, have we ever had any limits in the past that would cause any shutdowns if we fell below a certain amount?
Through the chair, from shutdowns, you're meaning operational shutdowns?
Yeah.
No, I would say we have not had that. And typically what we do is we work towards service levels, and that's why we have the GFR to handle any over expenditures. So winter road maintenance is the prime example. We've got a winter maintenance policy. We work to implement that policy, whether it snows once a year or 10 times a year. And that's why either the winter maintenance reserve or the GFR, if needed, is there to handle it. So we don't shut down operations if things are more expensive. We work towards service levels and then have a conversation with the council if need be.
Have we ever toyed with that idea? I'm not suggesting we are. I'm just wondering whether that's even smart to do for a city.
Yeah, through the chair, I would say from an operation perspective, that's not something we'd recommend.
Yeah.
Typically, we need to react very quickly if things are not as expected. Weather is the primary example where if it's flooding, we're not waiting for budget approvals to go clear catch basins. We're going to do it, and same with snow removal. But we do need to have delegated authority and, you know, the decisions made at the appropriate level in the organization, and we're working towards that. And ultimately, council needs to approve any budget over expenditures and then think about the future of that level of service. So do we want to reduce that level of service in the future to reduce cost, or do we want to fund it appropriately?
Okay, thanks for that. So there's 24 of these, right? What is the cost to keep 24? I think I've asked this in one way or another in the past. Are you working on a software piece that will allow us to have multiples at not multiple of cost?
So through the chair, there is internal costs to these, definitely. The complexity of accounting systems to handle municipal complexities is high. I would say we need to balance, like we want to have the right amount. It's probably the way we're managing that in terms of you don't want to, there might be good reasons to have a reserve, but if it's not material, then the cost of the benefit outweighs. So that's where in the last few years, my understanding is we've done a review and shrank the number of reserves. That being said, there are other municipalities with a lot more reserves than ours, and I'm interested in going to find out how they handle that workload. So do they have systems that are more robust than ours, or are they just staffing up around it? I don't know. But part of my list is to investigate exactly what you just said. How do you balance that cost benefit in terms of reserves? Because it is, as myself and Shar, who's new, and everyone who's been here for a long time, Sheena, Jeff, like it is onerous process at times, but it's very, very valuable information. So we kind of have to strike that balance.
Okay, and to take full advantage of that money sitting there, most of the time. We had a presentation earlier this year from our people at TD Asset Management. So all of it sits with their advice, all 24?
Through the chair, so yeah, our cash and investment balances, so that's what you're speaking to, ebbs and flows with operations, timing around when we get revenues versus expenses, and then how things flow in and out of reserves, capital carry forward, and deferred revenue. So very complex. In general, what we do is, yes, any funds that we have, we put into 4 categories on a cash basis. First would just be checking account. Now, we get interest on all of those bank accounts. We don't keep it in something not earning anything.
Yep.
If we feel like we have excess liquidity, so we have more money than we need in the short term, we will then transfer that into our trust fund, and TD manages that for us. In that management portfolio, we have short-term, mid-term, and long-term objectives, so we'll split the money. And that's how we manage liquidity on top of these reserves. So yes, when we do have money in reserves, we are taking good fiduciary duty for our citizens and investing it appropriately so that we're getting a return on it.
Okay, thank you. I had one other question, and I'm scrolling up to find where I made that mark. Please bear with me. So you're looking to add 4 more reserves to the 24 today. And these updates on minimums and maximums. That's all you're looking for today. Is that correct?
Through the chair, and to direct administration to put forward a plan to, through budget, to get back to minimums and reserves that are below minimum.
Okay, and when do you think that plan would be presented?
Through the chair, that would be presented at budget time in December as part of, so just to take us through that again at a high level, we're doing the current service level budgets.
Yep.
And then we're going to have all the answers to your questions that you've been giving us the last meetings. And then we're going to have a supplemental list of enhanced service requestments that council can debate to see if they want to add it. It would go on the enhanced service level because there's nothing, again, to the good questions today, that requires us to get these reserves above a minimum. So it would all be up to council at budget time.
So let's do a little thought experiment. Let's say we had those bylaws done up that way. What are the cons of having that?
Through the chair, so if you had a mandatory bylaw that we had to stay at minimum, we would have mill rate increases that were not at the discretion of council. So you'd have a mill rate, if I said, okay, the snow removal reserve is $2 million under the minimum, and the bylaw said I have to have a 1-year return back to minimum, I would be required then by law to put in a mill rate that got us back the $2 million the next year. The only one we have there is on the general fund reserve. So by the Cities Act, if the general fund reserve falls below 0, we are required the next year to have it get back to 0. That's the only one that operates that way. Everything else is up to council discretion.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that's a con. That holds us tight to anything else and all these wishes we heard about from Jim the other day. I'm wondering what my other colleagues think about that. I'd love to discuss that a little more. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mancinelli?
I appreciate the debate. What's brought forth so far, I'm so happy with this committee, it's not even funny. You know, you ask for transparency and information, it's painful. Looking at the state of the reserves, knowing some of the ways of replenishing it changed over the last couple of years, like all the bruises are out for everyone to see, but I think that's the importance of municipal government, You know, we can't run a deficit. This pressure is important. As Councillor Siklis pointed out, I look forward to bringing a sober thought to budget time with what's going on, because it's what's necessary right now above all else. So just wanted to comment because everyone else was talking. I think the questions are great so far. And the transparency that's showing up right now is what's been looked for. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Warra? No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just would reiterate the point of, you know, if you're spending this much in an area that you've decided that you need, whether it's, you know, fleet maintenance or winter road clearance, whatever it is, you know that you're spending this amount of money. Like, giving yourself flexibility to not spend that in a year or to borrow from someplace else has to be paid the next year or sometime if you're chronically below average. So you're just deferring the decision around taxes. You're not really saving yourself a decision around taxes. You're just deferring it. You know, and you know, there might be reasons for that, and maybe you need some flexibility. But overall, yeah, the idea of having some minimum criteria to fund just is the right thing to do, in my opinion, for taxes. I do have another question, unless somebody else wanted to comment on that point, because you had asked for it. I have some other questions about the.
Go ahead.
Okay. And just on the new funds too, just to be 100% clear, you've got a sinking fund reserve. Is that the same as just a sinking fund?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's.
Through the chair, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I lost my train of thought of what else I was going to say. Well, I'll pass that. Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry, I do have one question, or a few questions. Actually, Councillor Mancinelli, you go ahead first.
I got all caught up on the warm and fuzzy about what was going on there, and I forgot a pertinent question. The noise attenuation reserve, understand we passed that as a council, understand the need for the new reserves. Also understand about populating existing reserves first. Were we to create that, would we start to populate that reserve right away or work towards that in the coming years?
So through the chair, that's the one reserve with no funding right now. That stemmed out of the conversation at council when the new policy was approved, and it's to start saving potentially for areas that don't fall under the policy. So Donnie and his great team are handling, you know, how to handle the existing policy, but there were some members of council that requested an ability for us to start putting money aside for areas that don't fall under the policy. This would just open the reserve. That's it. Council would then have to decide at budget time if it wanted to put money into this reserve. Otherwise, it would just sit there with a zero balance.
I guess what I was wondering is, was there a long-term plan over and above this year's budget in coming years to start administrative plan to populate it aside from this year's budget cycle? Would that be one of the piggy banks you'd be dropping a nickel into now and then, planning-wise, regardless of council's current decision, through the chair?
So through the chair, yeah, there's no plan from administration to populate that. That would be council driven.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Mancinelli. I do have a couple questions myself pertaining to some of the new reserves. One in particular is the noise attenuation wall, and just part of the policy around it. So, you know, typically we're going to put money in towards reserve for the project or the renewal of the project or the asset. We really haven't passed that one yet on the council floor about the attenuation wall, and we're creating a reserve for an attenuation wall, but we really don't have the asset classified yet. Can we have more discussion kind of around that particular one?
Yeah, so through the chair, yeah, so that's what we were just speaking to. That was put forth by council during the conversation around the policy, was asking administration to find a way for how we could possibly start saving for noise attenuation walls in areas in older neighborhoods where we wouldn't be putting any up under the approved policy. That's all I'm doing here, is I'm just allowing council We're just setting up a reserve, so if council decides at some point to start saving for walls in areas that aren't covered by the current policy, we would have a place to put it. And that was just I'm just following through on a commitment I made at council. So it's up to council though if they want to actually put it in, if they actually want to open the reserve and put any money in.
Yeah, no, it's correct. It's a matter of the funding. It's not a matter of the actual number on the reserve. It's a matter of the funding, how to get there, and that's what we're short on. The more concerning comment, and I'm going to say this has been reflected already across the discussion so far. If you go to chart number 2, and we're showing on chart number 2 of our report, when we go to the 2029 year, and we're going to be at a balance of $66 million, I want to be in a position that when I leave this chamber and my term here in office, the next generation coming up won't be in the situation that we're facing right now. So if we project on that linear path, because we don't know what our spend is going to be coming up, we know we have cyclical fleet renewals. We also know we have cyclical aspects of maintaining our infrastructure, but we're draining the pot faster than we can replenish it at this point. So coming up in 2029 and beyond, we don't have that projection, but if we want to go on a linear regression, we are going to be hitting some pretty dire straits. So the question is, and I'm going to say for administration and perhaps for the subject matter experts in the room that are with us, do we have any knowledge of any spend against these reserves on that 25-year plan that we can start saying, okay, we need to do something sooner than later so we don't hit at the actual bottom of our overall reserve when we're forced to do something dramatic with taxation?
Yes, thanks. So through the chair, great question. So this is our best estimate of all the reserves and where we're going to get to by 2029. Some areas do have a 25-year plan, so we have a utility 25-year model. So the utility reserve has a 25-year plan. Maybe someone can help me if anyone else are out at 25 years. But there's uncertainty, obviously, with all these the further you go out. In general, I'll repeat my comment that I feel the same way as you. In general, it looks like we are in a place where we're draining our reserves, and if we don't correct at some point, we're going to run out of reserves. And so that's why part of the recommendation in the report is for us to start to develop plans and put forth in budget, at least for the items that are negative, we need to have plans to get them back. Or below minimum, you have to have a plan to get back. So start to put some things and have the conversation at council to say, we can't continue to just pull out of reserves to keep taxes low in the short term, because I 100% agree with Ted that that's just deferring it to the next council cycle or the next generation. And so first steps we've recommended in this report are that we ask council to tell administration to put forward a plan to start funding these things. Because right now, given our service level budgets, that's not part of what council has instructed us to do.
Yes, and you know what, more of the concerning things, we're looking at that immediate discussion about what we're going to look at the 2026, 27 budget levels. The going forward to 29 and beyond budget levels, we have to have, I'm going to say, that longer range forecast. We have to start looking at 2048 if we want to do this properly. So we have to start projecting out to 2048. I'm going to say, Mr. Ioni, you know what's happening with some infrastructure with the water. You've just completed some major infrastructure, but you have a huge lift coming up right away. So we have to have those projections out coming up sooner than later. And in saying that as well too, what can we do between now and the next short-term council or meetings to go to council to get a better grasp on how to start replenishing the reserves. Right now, we're just gonna take an evaluation and look at this process to start, one, getting the projections out further so we can say, hey, this is where we're gonna be at in 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And two, here's how we're gonna fund it. Either we have funds from operations coming in, or it's gonna be continuous debt cycles, i.e., borrowing to fund projects.
So through the chair, very complex questions. Like I said, there's some reserves where we're out that far. To develop those types of models for all 24 reserves would be quite a lift. I would say our first steps would maybe to just be focusing on 5 years and picking out the reserves that have issues, because we have reserves with issues in 5 years. We have reserves with issues right now. So the first step would be to develop with council a plan on addressing those. Once we have those addressed, then we can put that back into the puzzle. And then, we're gonna come back with an asset, Mr. Doney, what's the asset management plan strategy? That will tie into this as well, right? So all of that information all ties and flows together. I agree that long-term, what you're describing is exactly where we want to be. But we're going to have to be patient and build it over time because we're not there right now.
Would we be able to come back, I'm going to say 1 year from now and have something getting in place? Like we say, here's your tasking. This is a major alarm right now. Like the alarm is the budget cycle, but if we go put our heads together and said, okay, if we want to stretch out a 25-year plan, here's what my spend is going to be projected. You know what, this is a projected spend. This is a projected revenue stream, but we can start mapping this thing out with some kind of, I'm going to, throw it a year for a time cycle.
Through the chair, so yeah, I would say, because I know you guys, so this committee can't put forward anything for us to do, but I would say we could have that conversation at council when this comes up on next council meeting. And a year sounds okay to me. I'll have to talk to my staff though. I'll have a couple weeks here before next council.
Okay.
And I don't know all the complexities, right? I'm new. I'm going to play the new guy card. What you're talking about is very complex. And so I just want to have time to sit down with my staff and go, okay, what do we think we would need to do in order to achieve that? And then we can have that conversation at council in a couple weeks, if that works for you.
Yeah. Mr. Doney?
Through the chair, I just want to add a bit more context and connect some of the dots that council sees on a regular basis. So on October 3rd, we're going to have hopefully a very detailed conversation about the utility, and so that'll be the operating capital expenses for the utility, and we'll share a little bit about the long-term utility model there, at least a 10-year plan, knowing that we have a longer plan in place. And we'll ask council, or we'll forecast what the utility budget will be there, and the implications of not funding that, of course, then the reserves will drop, and we'll be in a worse situation than we are today. When council sees reports like the residential road report and the street infrastructure road report, you've seen those, I think it was towards the early this year, you'll see another one in early 2026. Those are the level of service that we set for the residential roads and the major roads, and they forecast, based on the current funding that we have, what that level of service will be in the future. Residential roads are in relatively good spot because council previously has approved a 1% mill rate increase to fund those. Our major roads are not in quite as good shape right now, and so we'll bring something forward to council as part of those reports as here's an option to fund it at this level of service, or we can drop the level of service and provide a different level of funding. So from an asset perspective, I think we're in really good shape, and from an individual service perspective, we're in a good shape. What Mr. Anderson is referring to is pulling all that together into one larger model is a bit more complex, and like I said, we can talk about that over the next few weeks of how that could be implemented.
Thank you very much. Councillor Teclease?
Thank you. Good talk, good questions. A couple more things just to make sure I'm seeing this correctly. So in 5 years, our reserve has dropped 68%. From 199 million to 63. Am I reading that correctly? Chart number 2, 5-year historical reserve position and forecast.
That's right, through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Pretty dramatic. another thought experiment. Let's say we had that bylaw in place where we would have to go to the public to replenish reserves for 2026, that would kick in at the end of this year. With the numbers where they are today, can you do a quick and dirty calculation on what that would be on a mill rate increase?
So through the chair, I have to assume you're saying if everything had to be at minimum?
Yeah.
So this would be everything that was below minimum, and how much we are below minimum? We don't know that off the top of our head.
No, that's okay, but it
I would say
shouldn't be
this,
a hard calculation though, right?
this
From
is,
this. I should have
We
done it
can do it.
myself, sorry, but
where are we at here? So, I'll 12,
it's okay, there's only 7 people watching live, so. Incredible.
We can do it if you want to take a break.
Yeah, if you want to take a break, we could do that. It's just, and would you want us, if it falls between the current minimums or the ones we're suggesting? Sorry.
I would say
My
the
colleague,
latter would be the
Ms.
more
Calendar
important.
has said.
Yeah,
take
the
that-
ones you're
that
suggesting,
option.
yeah.
We take that back.
Mr. Anderson, are you wanting to take a recess for a few minutes?
If the committee wishes us to calculate that now, we'd have to take a break, yes.
Why do we come back in 5-10 minutes? What's your time?
Sounds good, Chair. Yeah.
How about, hang on 1 second. We just need a motion to take a recess, and we will come back in at 5 o'clock exactly.
So should we do the 25?
Can I have a motion? Councillor Peace? In favor? Okay. got 1 minute to drop. Jamie's still on? Okay, we're going to call the meeting back to order. Thank you very much for the strong calculations you did over the quick break. A couple more people are filtering in. Do you have Councillor Teclise's number?
So yes, through the chair, based on whether we use the new limits, the existing limits, it's going to be roughly 15 to 17% mill rate increase. So $55 million is what we're short.
Okay, let me write that down, okay? Yeah, so repeat that one more time. To get back to our funding level where we need to be in the reserve, we are at about 15% mill rate increase.
To get all of the reserves that are below the minimum, to get them all up to the minimum in 1 year would be 15 to 17% mill rate increase.
Okay, that, I'm gonna say that's a unsurmountable lift at that point in a 1 year time frame.
Through the chair, that's why I would recommend more so that we are required to have a plan to get back to minimum over a short time period versus a hard and fast rule that says you must get back there.
Okay.
That's where I would prefer to go.
Okay, and on that long-term plan, we have to look at the long-term plan and how to take the entire thing from 2029 to 2048 to see where we're sitting at.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. We do have some more further questions. Councillor Mancinelli?
Thanks. Like I said so far, I really enjoyed the conversation, and I appreciate the importance of keeping things right-sided. And it sounds like an ugly situation talking about just managing through expense. At the back of the report, there's a couple different charts with some averages and ratios. The reserves per capita and reserves to expenses. With the information talked about in this report, how do those go forward? I'm thinking everything we spend turns into an investment. Those investments are for a purpose. Something like the development reserve that fell in arrears, taking on debt to get the wastewater Northwest solution in there. Are we kind of moving one type of debt to another type of debt to try to get the payback, to get growth and a tax lift happening? And is that investment part of the solution for the tax lift that happens in a community? Because that's how communities grow and are planned. Does that make sense? Is there more than one way to get these reserves right-sided? These reserves fell into array because of investments. Some of them were like SAFEs not being proper and having to pay development charges and having that fall into arrears. We've taken out debt to right-side that, so that's no longer a problem. The water solution in the East End, hundreds of millions of dollars invested. We didn't just fix it, we made sure it was proper going forward. These were long-term investments for a city. A city operates by collecting property taxes. We can't always increase the property tax to exact everything to right-size the reserve. Those investments are made with an expected payback and growth as the city grows, and that's part of the formula too. Is that a better way to say it?
Yes, so through the chair. So yes, debt is a way for the city to extend so instead of 17% in 1 year, that's roughly $55 million. In theory, we could get debt of $55 million, and then that you would have to pay the interest and principal of that sinking fund every year for the next 30 years, if you decided to finance that over 30 years. So you'd be taking a current deficit, truing it up, and then paying for it over 30 years. It wouldn't be much different than just deferring it, other than we'd be adding interest expense to it.
Yeah.
A definite, and then we would get into some complexities around the Cities Act, I think, on what we can actually debt fund and what we can't debt fund. I'm not clear on that. So we would have to research if we could debt fund reserve balances. Typically, we try to only debt fund physical assets that we know will last us 30 years. versus just a hole in the budget.
Has to fit the amortization. Let me try this a different way. I made it too complex with too many projects. The Costco, we invested out of a reserve to secure the Costco being built within our city limits. Is that correct?
Through the chair. So we are using money that's being earned within the land development reserve to pay Costco an incentive that will be replenished with property taxes from the Westera commercial area.
Yeah, so that was my point. The tax lift that comes from smart investment to right size your utilities, your wastewater, your fresh water, to allow for that growth, for the tax lift to happen as a healthy community properly grows, is a piece of this over and above just the expense addressing the correction of the reserves. I thought we didn't really talk about that portion of right-sizing the reserves. It was only expense mill rate option being given. And I think the city's a lot more complex in its planning and its investments. And I thought that as we're having this conversation about reserves, we should maybe talk about, does that fit into the picture as well?
Through the chair. So yes, all of those things add another layer of complexity, right? So when we're doing any kind of financial planning, whether a 1 year, 2 year budget, or looking out through our treasury department on cash requirements over time and where we can use debt to fill holes versus taxes, all of that stuff also plays into the reserves.
And so
absolutely. So
yeah.
it's very complex.
And I guess that was my last comment. The city of Regina I walked into as a new councillor compared to the city of Regina I'm sitting at right now. A lot of those long-term problems that were quicksand for us have been addressed painfully, but it should open up for better future outcomes to help right-size these reserves. Is that part of the plan through the chair?
So yes, through the chair, yes, the investments that we've been making the last few years are about making Regina ready for the next, to get to 300,000 people, 350,000 people. As we grow and increase our economies of scale, we definitely have more resources to replenish these funds.
And I guess that was the last part of my comments. I'm sorry, my brain works confusing sometimes, but at the very end of the report, there's some very good ratio-based graphs that kind of speak to this and the investment made on behalf of the residents of Regina. And although when the Leader Post publishes a $100 million expense in the paper, that $100 million price tag is massive to stare at for all of us. When these are explained and compared to a ratio on the health of the city, you guys are actually kind of shepherding us quite well. So it's hard to imagine sometimes with what we discuss at council all the time, but that's what this committee is about, is actually absorbing this in its proper context. And I think that really speaks well at the back of the report to bring that context to me. Yes. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Warwick?
Thank you. Actually, to you, Mr. Chair, you said earlier on that you'd sure like to leave a legacy of not having this problem in the future. And one of the things, right now the recommendation as it stands looks at changing the bands, the minimums and maximums for the funds, adding some funds. But one thing that we talked about that you may want to challenge council with is the idea of putting in a requirement to repay these funds over a period of time, 3 years, 2 years, not sure. But you could put that to council and have admin come up and prepare options to put in regulations or in policy that funds be repaid over a period of time, 2 or 3 years, whatever you see fit. It wouldn't start year one, and I wouldn't recommend that you started this budget in 26. But you could put that policy and that motion in place to start it in the next fiscal year so that you have time to plan for what this means. But once it's in place, your budgeting will have to replenish these funds over time. And you will be in a situation where you've got, have to make choices around these fixed expenditures that you know you're going to make. So.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, would you want to have a comment on that too? Since we're going to the budget cycle here pretty soon, and we're looking at some solutions.
Through the chair, yeah, again, that's conversations I've been having with my team as we develop this out and we start to look at all the moving parts, is that there has to be some mechanism, right? Otherwise, having mins and maxes, other than us having a great conversation today that I've enjoyed, doesn't doesn't move us anywhere. I do really like your plan of saying this, it's too short of a window, this fiscal planning session. But if we have some sort of indication from council that we have to come up with a plan for next cycle, would be perfect, actually.
Starts in 27.
Yeah.
Commit to it.
Councillor, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the compared to what questions I'm going to get. And I was at Councillor Bezo's coffee talk last Saturday, and I met a gentleman who said, I'm leaving. I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to Alberta, where the taxes are lower. I said, okay. And he gave me some details and what have you. So a lot of the times when we're out in the community and they see that we're currently learning that based on our quick calculations, we need, 13.5% from the city plus whatever our partners are going to come with for tax increase. And if we were to straighten out everything in the reserves right away, that's another 15 to 17 points. So going to the public with a 30% increase is going to make me need to, unlist my phone number, among other things. But we're not going to do that. There are smarter ways to do it. But I also think it's important when people keep saying, I'm going somewhere else or I've had enough, no matter how much they see that, the cost of living here is less. When we look at reserves per capita and reserves to expenses, I was wondering if you had a little more you wanted to add on that, specifically reserves per capita when we're comparing them against 5 other cities, Saskatoon, Winnipeg, Ottawa, Edmonton, and Calgary. Those are the target cities, I suppose, that you're looking at. And what stands out to me is Calgary's huge reserves per capita. Not sure how they got there. Do you know what is behind that?
No, sorry, through the chair, Calgary specifically, I'm not sure if they have a big reserve right now for their stadium project or where it's at. I know in some of the analytics that we're driving through our benchmarking process, they're collecting more taxes than their core expenses. So that's right, they're actually collecting more money than they need for core expenses. So that would explain where they're putting it. I don't know if nothing specific. We can look in more into Calgary specifically, but this is sort of that first step to understand different cities. I do know they have that one major project ongoing. They are spending a lot of money on transit as well. So they have their own complexities and issues. Overall, I'll say Calgary's tax rates are much higher than ours.
Yeah.
So, and they have especially on the corporate side, and so they're actually actively engaging in a plan to shift taxes from the corporate sector to the residential.
And it's a snapshot in time, of course. So we don't have a multi-year view of a fluctuation there. I don't know how hard it is to present something like that. It would be nice to know how we compare against cities that we've said we're targeting as comparators. And maybe that's a takeaway for something to calculate there. That's it. I don't have anything else. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Funding. I just want to talk quickly about funding. We can't make the decisions here. It's going to go to council, but I'm just going to briefly comment on what 7 cents per day will do. So right now, we talked about how we could fund these reserves. And this is what, at 7 cents, we have roughly at the end of 2024, about 91,000 households in Regina. 7 cents a day works out to, call it $2 a month.
Okay.
In 25 years, when we have another major cycle, we would have $92 million in a bank account or a reserve. And this is what $2 a month will do. So part of the funding, we don't want to break the bank. There's no doubt we don't want to break the bank, but we have to be sensible and we have to forecast what we need to do in 25 years. In 5 years, our forecast is pretty gruesome. we need to leave this in a really good position for the next generation. So I want administration to also look at that of, you know, a very small lift to put specifically, we do have that dedicated mill rate increase into the reserves, but a very small number to put into the reserves as well for future spending.
Through the chair, yes, we definitely, as part of the recommendations in this report, it's to do a budget to replenish the ones specifically in the negative, but that will be one tactic we will look into and put forward.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we had a lot of great conversation, a lot of questions around the reserve report. A great job putting it in, and you know, it's fantastic to say from where I'm sitting and where this committee is sitting, and when council sees it soon, this is reality at this point. This is absolute reality. There's a lot of spend that's been happening. There's a lot of spend that needs to be done. We have a lot of infrastructure, and I think there's a lot of people that recognize that we have to put money away to spend on infrastructure, otherwise our city will fall apart. So thank you for yourself and your team for putting this together. So if there's no other questions on this report, I would like to ask the mover if they wish to close debate. Okay. I'd like to call the vote, ask her to call the vote. One more question?
I'd like to make a change to the motion to add the request of administration to prepare options for a reserve policy that requires adherence to a minimum balance over, you know, a period of time. Or am I out of order?
Let me check with the clerk here.
I just want to make an addition to the motion.
Okay, let me check with the clerk. Okay, so we got some very technical advice from our city clerk here. So I'm going to pass this over to our city clerk first on explanation on the mechanics behind the procedure.
Through you, Chair. So technically the vote has been called. It is up to the chair to decide how he would like to move forward with this. If he wishes to entertain what you would like to do, Mr. Wara, he would need to ask the mover if the mover wishes to remove the motion to receive and file, because what you're wanting to do would be contrary to the main motion that's on the floor. If the mover decides not to withdraw the receive and file motion, then the receive and file would need to come to a vote. If that fails, then you would be permitted to move your motion. But also, if your motion does get put on the floor, it would need to be to direct administration to, or not direct administration, but to direct city council to direct administration to do that work, because this committee cannot direct administration to do any work. Okay.
Mr. Rohr, any comment on that, or?
That's procedure. That's fine, yeah.
So do you, I would be fine to ask the mover.
If, I think, well, I'm putting the question to this committee, yeah, to you, Mr. Chair, that I would like to make that amendment, and we can accept it or not.
Okay, Mr. Anderson?
Thank you. Through the chair, just to add some more complexity to this, our great partners at Myers Norris Penny have informed me that we do have a policy somewhere that says we need to get back to minimum within 3 years. I don't know where that is, so I don't know if that impacts Ted, your desire, but we'll have to look into that, because obviously if there's, is a policy somewhere, we're gonna have to dig it out.
Well, see, that's what we're asking for, so that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably not required then, the amendment.
Perfect. So we're going to proceed with the report as a receive and file at this point. So we had the debate, we called the vote. So I'm going to ask the clerk to call the vote.
Councillor Mancinelli.
In favor.
Mayor Bashinsky.
In favor.
Ted Warwa.
In favor.
Councillor Siklees.
In favor.
Rob Wilman.
In favor.
And yourself, Mr. Chair.
In favor.
The motion carries.
Thank you very much. Can I have some move a motion for private session? Councillor Cleese? Can I ask for the new, oh, sorry.
Thank you, through the chair. Just before we go in private, I wanted to just thank my team and everyone else who is here for all the hard work. This is another heavy lift, and we've done a ton of work around budget and this stuff, so I wanted to make sure they know it. I appreciate all that work and them being here today, so thank you. Sorry, through the chair.
Thank you very much.